I'll start with you, Michelle. Who do you think the SNP can now recruit who would give Labour a run for their money? Because it does seem like they're running out of time to establish a new successor in the way that Nicola Sturgeon was etched on everyone's minds.
Oh, well, I think that's the major problem they're facing, because the choices they've got is actually quite limited. They've got to choose from within the Holyrood pool. And what you're looking at is probably somebody like Kate Forbes or Angus Robertson or Humza Yousaf, all of which come with issues where the party's concerned. I mean, Kate Forbes has just had a baby. Whether she wants to go back into the fray and take on such a big job is a big question. And of course, her views, her own personal principles won't chime with a lot of the sort of more left-wing socialist members of the party. Angus Robertson has been quite quiet since coming back into Holyrood. And of course, he presided over the failure to get the census delivered effectively. And well, Humza Yousaf, where do I start? He's nicknamed Humza Useless for a lot of reasons, but he isn't considered to be a safe and strong pair of hands. What we really have is no obvious succession. Nicola Sturgeon held power so tightly that she hasn't left the SNP with somebody charismatic who can just walk in, take the party with her. And she herself divided the party. I mean, there's a good reason we have somebody from Alba today, and I think I would probably credit Nicola Sturgeon with creating the ground that Alba is now starting to soak up. And I think it'll be very interesting because I think there's a battle royal coming between those two parties.
Yes, it's quite remarkable how... I'll come to you in a minute, Neil, but it's quite remarkable how Nicola Sturgeon managed to talk about how important it was to rid politics of the divisive language and stop being polarising when, in my view, and I'm sure a lot of people's view, she is one of the most divisive politicians in this country, if not the most. Neil, what do you think? What does this mean for independence? In my mind, it probably puts independence on the back foot.
I think there are a range of views that you can take on that, Emily. I think the first point I would make is that the cause of independence is not about any single individual or indeed about any single political party. There are a variety of parties in Scotland that support the cause of independence, and indeed quite a lot of Civic Scotland who are not party affiliated who support the cause of independence. But it's unavoidable to acknowledge that the recent debacle over the gender recognition reform legislation has driven many people away from the SNP. I think it would be churlish not to acknowledge that. But the important thing is that, the movement, which encapsulates all of the parties, and that's where I think Michelle is very mistaken, is our resolve and some of that divisiveness that you spoke about between different elements of the movement will potentially be healed by this move. And we will be, I'm willing to collaborate with anyone from any party who is interested in furthering the case for Scottish independence. So I don't think it's the big win that the Unionists think it will be. And I think I would caution anyone who thinks that Labour is any kind of solution on gender recognition reform, if that's the issue you're concerned about, because they are committed to delivering that if they are in government. So the only way to solve this significant challenge is to ensure that sex-based rights are enshrined in a written constitution for an independent Scotland.
Well, Michelle, Neil's right there. It could go two ways, couldn't it, when it comes to independence? This could be seen as a bit of a dead end. Nicola herself seemed to try every avenue there was possible to get the second vote she wanted. But also you could see a reinvigoration of the entire movement now that Nicola, who was so divisive, is gone.
There's an element of truth in that, but there are still some very big questions to answer. I mean, you've mentioned the GRR bill. I mean, a large proportion of the MSPs voted for it, including all of Labour, or most of Labour. But actually, Alex Salmon and, as I understand it, Alma were very, very strongly against it. So, and that's just one thing where to come together, they're going to have to really compromise how they're going to do things. And the reason they split up in the first place is because they couldn't agree. They couldn't agree on the route to independence. You know, there is that side of the independence movement who believes they should just go hell for leather, ignore the law, just ram it through regardless of how the population of Scotland feel. And then there is the other side who are much more law-based, who want to do it, you know, more gently, who subscribe. And I believe Alex Salmon was one of those originally who subscribed to winning Scotland over through peaceful democratic means. You know, get devolution, show the people of Scotland how it could work. In fact, what we and the people of Scotland have found is that since devolution, things in Scotland have got worse.
Well, yes.
So rather than proving to us that independence is a good way forward, it's gone the other way. Our education systems have declined, our transport systems have gone downhill. We've got ridiculous laws like GRR, you know, the named person that they tried to push through. They've now got a bottle return scheme that is just nonsense. So the independence movement, yes, I totally get that they're a movement and lots of people support it. But what you've seen is a lot of people now saying, whoa, hang on a minute. Yes, I want independence, but the direction of travel of the so-called independent supporting parties is really uncomfortable and it's doing nothing for Scotland and the people of Scotland. So this is a huge mountain to climb.
Yeah, and there's only so long you can keep blaming Westminster if you're proving to be incompetent, perhaps, at running as First Minister. But Neil, very quickly, I'm sorry, we're running out of time, which is a real shame. But Neil, just lastly, who would you fear the most as the next leader of the SNP?
Well, I just challenge Michelle on the idea that Scotland has problems and they are indivisible, or they are divisible from Westminster's control, and that is simply not true. They are indivisible. I'll tell you a wee story rather than give you a prediction.
Or the education.
If I had earned £100,000 every day since the Battle of Bannockburn until today, I still wouldn't have taken the same amount of money out of Scotland as Shell did in profits last year. So to say that Scotland can't afford to have a much better community and service provision is an absolute nonsense. Of course we can be independent. And Neil, I would say Ash Reagan.
Neil, I do have sympathy because people said that about Brexit and I did then vote Brexit. So, you know, I don't think that people should be allowed potentially to have the right to try it out. But who would you fear the most as SNP leader?
Well, I would like to see somebody who is not tethered to the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. You know, that legislation was brought forward really at the First Minister's behest. It was never discussed or debated at an SNP conference. I had my troubles in the SNP because I spoke up about my concerns around women's safety, 2.5, 3 years ago, or longer, actually, in 2019. And that is how fiercely the First Minister defended her hobby horse of gender reform. And it's no surprise that it has become this really divisive and problematic issue.
There we go. I think it may.
Your proponents have been vicious in the way that they've defended it.
Neil. Sorry to interrupt, but perhaps that will be Kate Forbes because she, I believe, spoke out against it for women's rights reasons.